The Last Blitzkrieg. This is definitely a vintage game. I found it, in a sense, in my collection a couple of days ago. I don't remember when I acquired it, how or why, but it was there. I realized I hadn't played it. It looked like it was solitaire friendly, so it looked like it could be a good game in these days of social distancing that we're all experiencing. And so I gave it a try. I enjoyed it, and so I thought I may as well tell a little bit about it in my video. The Last Blitzkrieg is a two-player game about the battle of the second battle of the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. We call it different ways, but we know what it is. Bastogne and all of those epic moments that you remember from the TV show Band of Brothers or from other, or maybe books that you read. So, The Last Blitzkrieg, two-player game, but also perfectly playable as a solitaire game by a single player controlling both sides at the best of their possibilities, and that's how I played it. It is a game that you can still find easily. I checked online, it's not that hard to find, and definitely it is entry level. I actually even considered playing it with my daughter Luisa, who is 7, and she has been playing war games that I would have struggled to play at age 7, maybe even at age 14, so she's very gifted. I haven't played this one with her, not because I don't think she could not understand the rules, which she totally could. It just takes a while to play. But as a solitaire player, that is perfectly fine. There's also another thing. Games about the Battle of the Bulge very often do work better as solitaire studies than as actual two-player games because of the nature, because of the architecture of the event. And like it happened in reality, and like it happens in any game about this topic, you're gonna have, well, here's the map, it's a paper map, it looks, well, it looks its age, but actually not too bad, it doesn't look all that dated. Many maps by MMP that come out these days look exactly like this one, and it's perfectly serviceable and functional. So you're gonna have the Germans coming from this area here, and the Americans are defending there, but not many of them. Oh, nope, not nearly enough of them. So as it happens historically, and as you see in other games about Battle of the Bulge, there's no way around it. The Americans are gonna get pummeled really bad the first couple of turns. Their line is almost going to disintegrate. The very point in the first couple of turns is just to try to slow down the German advance. Reinforcements will come, and an American front line will emerge. After a while, even the Brits show up and say hello, but still it's going to be mainly an American endeavor, with American reinforcements coming from here, coming from there, coming from here. So still, as a German player, you can't completely ignore these reinforcements. You can just drive through your objective, which is actually to exit units from that area of the map. But again, if you ignore this area, then the Americans may cut your supply lines, and that becomes a problem. So the problem is, when you play a game with this topic, two-player, the first couple of turns are not very excited for the American player, who just sitting there and seeing the German player moving 40, 50 units, resolving a lot of attacks, and then all you do as the American player is to move to the other side of the river or to whatever piece of terrain seemed to offer some sort of advantage. So, again, perfectly appealing as a solitaire game because of the amount of randomness that comes from all the combat rolls, because there is no hidden information, and also, in particular, it may be an appealing option for solitaire players so that no one has to play the sucker the first couple of rounds. Again, it gets better later when the American player sees all the reinforcements. When the Germans do lose steam, they take a little bit of damage here, a little bit of damage there, not much in each single combat, but it compounds, and after a while it's enough for the Americans to have a real chance of turning the tide. The game pieces, the game units represented by these cardboard counters. You have artillery, infantry, you have motorized, mechanized, you have air units. Do we see any? No? Yes, maybe. Well, air units are used as support. You put them directly where you want them to be. For the German player, they're mainly usable to give you bonuses in combat. The American player has a more flexible way of using them. The American player can use them to attack German air units, can use them to interdict the roads, and then the advantage coming from the road is lost. As for the numbers that you see on the units, they represent combat, proficiency, and movement respectively. And proficiency is used in several tests and especially to generate combat modifiers. Now, the turn structure is very basic, is very linear, which is first you have the German player taking a turn, and then the American player taking a turn, and then you move to the next game turn. Each player's turn has a supply phase first, in which you see if you're able to trace supply to your edges of the map. The supply line must be free of enemy units and zones of control. And this is important. The presence of a friendly unit does not cancel an enemy zone of control for supply purposes, which is different from other games. So supply is a little more fragile than you would otherwise expect. Then you have the reinforcements, when the active player may receive reinforcements. Movement, move your units up to full movement allowance. And here, since mechanized units can only enter forests using roads and can only cross rivers at bridges, and bridges can be blown, then of course it's all about playing with the bottlenecks, which again captures the spirit of the event, as American players trying to precisely exploit those bottlenecks and the German players trying to concentrate force around those bottlenecks, but still stacking limits will prevent or will make it really hard for the German player to bring all of their forces to bear. So movement phase for the player, for the active player, then the active player declares attacks, then the active player resolves armor exploitation movement. That is, during the movement phase, the active player can mark several, any if they decide, can mark their armor units as in reserve, and they simply don't do anything during the initial movement and during combat, but after the combat phase, then they can move, which is of course a way to precisely exploit a gap that you may have been able to create during the combat phase. As for combat, classic, very classic. You divide the combat factors of the attacker by those of the defender. Turn that into combat odds. That will give you the column. Apply modifiers based on several things, such as terrain, such as support, such as concentric attack. That will give you shifts right or left once you have the column. Roll the die and modify it by the difference in the proficiency between the attacker and the defender. And so once you have the right line, you cross-reference it with the column, and you'll have the number of hits that you apply to the defender on the left side of the slash, and the number of hits to be applied to the to the attacker to the left, and the defender. Attacker and then defender. You can convert a hit into a retreat. So say if you took 3 hits, you can lose 3 steps or lose 2 steps and move 1 hex back. Any combination, unless there is an asterisk, in which case you have to take at least 1 hit as a step loss. You cannot convert every hit into retreats. Otherwise, the option of retreating is pretty flexible, is pretty and easily available, which immediately tells you that, of course, victory is predicated on position of enemy units, and that's why it's so easy, precisely because it's tempting to just rely a lot on retreat. But that gives the opponent a positional advantage that may actually give them victory. So this is the general idea. As I told you, it's really super simple, which is supply, reinforcements, movement, combat, armor exploitation, during combat, again, different things may happen. It's very simple, very basic, but you have a little bit of chrome here. So artillery unit, for example, can be used not necessarily to attack or to support an attack, can be used to inflict shock on the opponent, which reduces their functionality without inflicting actual damage. I talked about the interdiction and the different way in which air units of the American player work differently. You have a couple of extra rules to mirror the advantage, the surprise advantage, the surprise advantage, the shock advantage of the German player early on. But all of those little chromatic elements, those unique rules, do not really feel too burdensome. Overall, the game remains very simple. Continue like this, turn after turn, until you reach the victory conditions of the game, which may be that, again, a player manages to win, the German player manages to win by completing the victory conditions, or the American player manages to win by preventing the American player from... The American player wins by preventing the German player from winning the game. So, the last Blitzkrieg. I think this game aged very well. Frankly, if this game came out exactly like this today, I may not know that it's a reissue of an old game. And maybe it's because I'm getting older and grumpier and less excited about long, complicated rulebooks. So when the game is about move and attack plus maybe something else like an exploration movement phase and a couple of little elements of chrome here and there, I'm happy. And ta-da, this is exactly what this game is. This is exactly what this game does. I don't have any problem with the combat odds. It's a solid way of resolving combat. It has worked since time immemorial. I think there was a cave in France where there's a painting of two people that are calculating combat odds. That's how solid that mechanism is. So, to me, it works. It has a classic feel to it, but I don't see that as a problem at all. I see it as, wow, a game that I see there on the wall, I pick it up, I can read the rule book quickly and start playing quickly. And then the emphasis is on gameplay, which is solid, which is fun. I would say this actually. I reviewed other games about the Bulge in the past, in which I told you that they really only work as solitaire studies because there's nothing to do for the American player for the first couple of turns. I would say in this game, I still played solitaire playing both sides, but I would say if I was playing it against a human opponent and I was an American player, I would be less bored at the beginning than in other games that I played on the same subject. You still see the overall architecture, but I feel that here the American player has more things to do than just considering, meditating about the meaninglessness of life and just feeling existential dread and anguish. Because there are more things that you can do, at the very least, about moving towards which bottleneck you're trying to exploit. And will I be able to blow up a bridge and when? And then the reinforcements seem to come a little earlier in terms of turns than they do in other games. And they come in positions that feel more threatening to the German player than I've seen in other games. When I was switching to the American side, mentally, I found that there were more interesting things to do early on, even in those catastrophic early phases of the Battle of the Bulge, than in a lot of other games. So actually, this is a game about this topic. It still gives you the feel for the event, the general architecture of the event, but seems to be more friendly in a multiplayer context than other games that I've seen on the same subject. And again, I know other games came out since there are comments online and say, oh, this game has been completely superseded by Bitter Woods, but I think there's still a role for this one because it's similar to Bitter Woods, but it's simpler, and so there are times where that is just what you need. Instead of a bigger symphonic concert, just a little bit of relaxing chamber music in which you still get to move tanks and destroy stuff. So that's good. That's good to me. So I definitely enjoyed it. I enjoyed the classic feel. I enjoyed the simple flow, the intuitive flow and pace of the game, seeing the general architecture of the bulge in a map that looks slightly different and is organized slightly differently from other maps on the subject, and so it had its own set of problems, its own set of challenges, which of course were fun to approach and to try to deconstruct and resolve, because that is what is fun in game, to have a series of problems to solve and a series of dilemmas to address and interesting choices. And this game does that. It has a historical feel, it has good solid gameplay, old school gameplay, but I don't see that as a negative, so I'm not going to describe it as such. The last Blitzkrieg, maybe you also have it somewhere in your collection, you forgot that you had it, like I did. Maybe you can easily find a copy online, but overall, for an evening in which you're just there by yourself, practicing social distancing, and you want to have a simple, enjoyable war game, the last Blitzkrieg would be a good choice.